What was the best year in film? Easy. It's your favorite year. It had some of your favorite movies, and sure, it had a couple stinkers, but overall, it's the best, and it would be crazy for us to not include it in this video. Now that we got the obvious out of the way, how about the other contenders? Almost every year boasts many awesome films, making it really difficult to crown just one as the best. That's why we've rounded up 7 years that really stood out and tossed in a few honorable mentions along the way. These will be years that were the best an era of film had to offer, or years that reshaped the industry in groundbreaking ways, or years that just simply had a top shelf lineup. But hey, as always, we're dying to know your take in the comments. Which year do you think deserves the crown for the best in film history? So let's dive straight into it. 1999, a year stacked with an impressive lineup and the most recent year on our list. Since then, 3 years have come close to matching its quality, yet somehow fell short. Take 2019 for instance, a stellar lineup with many heavyweight directors dropping some incredible films. Remember how Parasite snagged Best Picture as the first foreign film to do so? And let's not forget the record-breaking success of Joker as the highest grossing R-rated film. And we've come to appreciate Endgame more and more each year as Disney keeps fumbling the MCU. But there were also all of these films, and these. 2019 looks even better when placed next to 2020, a year often regarded as one of the worst for film due to COVID, theater closures, and film delays. However, where 2019 stumbled was with its blockbusters. Sequels, a couple of mediocre Disney live-action remakes, and that infamous Star Wars letdown. But hey, they still made a lot of money, being the first year to have 9 films cross the billion-dollar milestone. Then there was 2014, a year that had me practically living at the movie theaters. It was a year full of outstanding films across all budget ranges, letting imaginative directors run wild with their ideas. Whiplash, The Grand Budapest Hotel, Nightcrawler, and Birdman, just to name a few. And don't forget about the continuation of the horror genre revival with It Follows and The Babadook. Even within the MCU, titles like Guardians of the Galaxy and The Winter Soldier brought a refreshing twist. And who could forget about all of these films and Paddington? But despite these gems, the year stumbled a bit by crowning Transformers: Age of Extinction as its highest grossing film, a pretty lackluster film to be represented by. And how about 2007? It carries a ridiculous catalog of films, perhaps the best year of English language filmmaking this century. Ratatouille, No Country for Old Men, There Will Be Blood, Zodiac, Superbad, Hot Fuzz, Atonement, and a whole lot more. It's often described as feeling similar to 1970s cinema, where you had smarter characters, actors challenging themselves, and happy endings being far from guaranteed. Although, let's be real, I'm not quite sure how B-movie fits into that 70s vibe. Yet, despite the tough competition from these standout years, 1999 snags the spotlight as our first pick for the best year. And rightly so. That year had it all. From iconic dramas to one of the most influential action films and a bunch of cult classics. Fight Club, The Matrix, American Beauty, Eyes Wide Shut, The Sixth Sense, The Green Mile, Magnolia, and all of these. Toy Story 2 basically guaranteed the future of 3D animation, while The Iron Giant proved there's still room for 2D charm. The Matrix not only spawned countless imitators, but also revolutionized filmmaking techniques, improving on the use of slow motion and spinning cameras, as well as introducing the bullet time effect. And the box office was very refreshing compared to other years, where The Sixth Sense turned a $40 million budget into a jaw-dropping $672 million worldwide, catapulting M. Night Shyamalan's career. But I guess this could be a negative depending on which fanbase you ask. In short, 1999 was a stellar year for everyone, from cinephiles to romance enthusiasts to even the alpha males. Alright, time to dial it all the way back to the year 1927. 1927 marked the tail end of the silent film era, paving the way for sound films, or known back then as talkies. And let me tell you, the silent era went out with a bang, dropping some of the best silent films ever within a single year. We're talking Metropolis, Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, and the epic 5.5-hour masterpiece Napoleon. These three, alongside 1928's The Passion of Joan of Arc, bid farewell to the silent film era with style. This year, we also saw the release of The Jazz Singer, the first feature film to include sound. Although only part of the film had sound, it set the stage for the end of silent films. It took until 1929 for Hollywood to fully embrace talkies and start churning them out regularly. But not many people knew what they were doing with sound films in the early years, having difficulties with the technology and from a creative standpoint. And that's why 1929 made it onto our worst years in films list, which makes 1927 the golden year of silent films look even better. And love it or hate it, the Academy also formed in 1927, which, along with the Oscars, would go on to influence what films were made for almost the next 100 years. Although the first Oscars didn't happen until 1929. And these were just some of the other great films 1927 had to offer. We now fast forward well into the sound era for our next year, 1939, also known as Hollywood's golden year. We couldn't forget about this one. In fact, it was the easiest one to add to the list. Just ask Google what was the best year in film and bam, it's 1939 front and center. But why all the hype? It's one of the standout years of Hollywood's golden age, but it was the peak of the studio system. The studio system was present since 1927 and involved major studios controlling film production and distribution. They had their own theater chains, had contracts with performers and filmmakers, and were very involved in the filmmaking process. And for a while, this all worked very well, with 1939 shining as an achievement of that system with hits like The Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, Stagecoach, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and a bunch more. We're talking classics upon classics, movies that left a mark on film history. The Wizard of Oz rocked the boat with its revolutionary use of Technicolor and its memorable characters, musical score, and fantasy storytelling. It was a critical success, but surprisingly didn't make a profit for MGM until a 1949 re-release. On the flip side, Gone with the Wind raked in the big bucks while also becoming the longest American film at nearly 4 hours. It was the highest grossing film at that time, and when adjusted for inflation, it still holds that title to this day with over $4 billion earned. Our next contender for the best year of film is much later in the golden age of Hollywood, and that's 1957. It had 12 Angry Men, Paths of Glory, The Bridge on the River of Kwai, 3:10 to Yuma, Witness for Prosecution, and all of these. It's still part of classical Hollywood along with 1939, but the studio system was starting to show signs of wear and tear. The 50s witnessed a shift from studio-driven to star-driven filmmaking, handing over more creative control to the folks actually crafting the films. Actors became freelancers, not bound to studios anymore. Those who backed films chased after star power. Actors, writers, and directors became marketing gold and helped minimize the risk of flops. And overseas, markets got real cozy with Hollywood, making up a whopping 40 to 50% of its total revenue by 1957. But hold up, it's not just Hollywood hogging the spotlight. Foreign films were on fire too. The Seventh Seal, Wild Strawberries, Throne of Blood, The Cranes Are Flying, and Knights of Cabiria, just to name a few. And 10 films from 1957 made it onto the Letterboxd Top 250, the most of any year. 1957 somehow still manages to stick out when it has 1954 just before it with films like Rear Window, Seven Samurai, Dial M for Murder, On the Waterfront, and La Strada. Or 1959 soon after it with North by Northwest, Some Like It Hot, Ben-Hur, Anatomy of a Murder, and The 400 Blows. It somehow sticks out in what is often considered one of the greatest decades of film. So now we have to leave the golden age of Hollywood behind for this next year, and that's 1974. That doesn't mean things get worse, because it's actually part of the second golden age of Hollywood, or more commonly known as New Hollywood. Around the mid-60s, theater attendance took a nosedive, leading to many major movie flops. Economic struggles had studios sweating bullets. The studio system was long gone by this point, but studios relinquished any control they had left and gave the keys to freedom to many young filmmakers fresh out of film school to basically do whatever they wanted. Enter the American New Wave or Hollywood Renaissance, a period of wild innovation and risk-taking led by these young filmmakers, especially by the group known as the movie brats. Film in this era delved into grittier, darker human themes or the emptiness of chasing the American dream. But first I want to give a shout out to 1967, which started the transition into New Hollywood with films like Bonnie and Clyde, The Graduate, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And also a shout out to 1976. Solid films there too, including the quintessential New Hollywood masterpiece, Taxi Driver. But 1974's lineup stands above the others with heavy hitters like The Godfather Part 2, Chinatown, The Conversation, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and A Woman Under the Influence. The movie brats were dropping films left and right. Even Francis Ford Coppola doubled down with 2 films this year, and Mel Brooks rolled out 2 classics as well. And even though this was a great year for New Hollywood, there was still a lot of quality output from foreign cinema with all of these. And just around the corner we have 1975. Another best year of film and maybe the most influential? This year played a major role in continuing New Hollywood and setting the stage for its end, much like 1927 did for silent films. To prove how good of a year this was, just take a peek at the Best Picture nominees. That lineup was one of the best there ever was. 1975 had 70s classics like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and Dog Day Afternoon. Barry Lyndon upped the ante in terms of how good a film can look, while a flood of top-tier foreign films stormed in. The Rocky Horror Picture Show had one of the longest original theater runs at a whopping 828 days, amassing a respectable cult following that still continues to this day. But there is one film that almost single-handedly put 1975 on the list. Yeah, Jaws. This film wasn't just a great movie. It caused a seismic shift in how we view summer blockbusters, pretty much inventing the term. It changed film marketing forever, putting more importance on wide releases and television marketing. What spawned from this was studios engineering blockbusters for quicker profits in film, ushering the blockbuster decade known as the 80s. Now, we did go over this influence as a bit of a bad thing in our last video because in the present day, we are really affected by this safer, profitable type of filmmaking. But without Jaws and 80s blockbusters, we'd miss out on many great films. But it wasn't only Jaws. 1977 deserves some credit for pushing blockbusters even further with films like Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And by 1982, we were really in the thick of it with the year of sci-fi. And both 1986 and 1987 were filled with great films, with the Jaws, Star Wars, and Close Encounters influence still leaking this late into the decade. And to wrap it up, we've gone full circle back to the 90s for another year packed with notable films, and that's 1994. This year was stacked with heavyweights like Pulp Fiction, Forrest Gump, and the Shawshank Redemption, which would be enough to earn a spot in this video. But then you also have the peak of the Disney Renaissance with The Lion King, and Tim Burton dropped one of his finest with Ed Wood, and Jim Carrey owned this year with The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, and Ace Ventura, and both three colors, white and red, and all these other foreign films released. Oh, and these films. And then we had these films. 1994 had everything. Sure, 1999 might have edged it out purely in terms of film releases, but the highs of 1994 were much higher. Pulp Fiction shook up the movie scene, much like 1967's Bonnie and Clyde, cutting through the dullness of a saturated industry and revolutionizing indie filmmaking. It opened doors, showing the money that could be made with a low-budget indie and really shined a spotlight on these kinds of films to be taken more seriously, where films these days like Moonlight can even go on to win Best Picture. 1994 even saw the birth of DreamWorks, which on its own could earn this year a spot on the list for Shrek enthusiasts. And speaking of Shrek, 2001 could have easily been on the list with that lineup, but we had to draw a line somewhere. But that's the problem. We've listed 7 best years of film and gave nods to 12 others, but it doesn't really answer the question. What was the best year in film history? Well, what if there existed a year where you could watch all the films from these standout years and even those we didn't mention? That's the beauty of it. Whatever year you're watching this video in, that's the best year in film. Sure, Disney might be on their second round of live action remakes or still fumbling the MCU, but at least you have this vast catalog of films from previous years that you'll probably never even catch up on. And there you have it, a handful of the finest years in film history. But we want to hear from you. What year gets your vote as the best year for film? Share your thoughts down below, and if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, hit that subscribe button for more, and swing by our Patreon for extra content and some awesome perks. And until next time, have a good one.